All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about scaffolds, which I know you guys know well and use all the time. But we're going to sort of expand and go deep a little bit into the process for creating scaffolds in a way that allows students to exercise agency and voice in selecting scaffolds for their learning and supports for their learning. So that's sort of where we're going with this, because obviously you guys are well versed in how to use scaffolds, and actually EL, as you know, is full of really great scaffolds. So we're just going to talk a little bit about how to sort of maximize that process for kids and for ourselves today. So to set some context, obviously we're aware that John Hattie and Marzano all understand and have done the research with their meta studies about the effect sizes of scaffolds, and that's really the research base that supports our understanding that these are highly effective strategies. But of course, we also know, just based on our classroom experience, that these are really powerful for kids. You want to click on the next one too, Jennifer? So we actually have also done a study of our own kids and our own teachers in our own classrooms here in Wake County, and our data came back the same way. We were looking at a particular kind of scaffold, at language scaffolds, which is really what most of the scaffolds that you all are used to using are. And we had the same results. So it came back as a very high effect size. Again, this was with our kids and our teachers here in Wake County. So it was good to have that local data to back up what we know is the sort of broader picture data around scaffolds. All right. And then these next two bubbles sort of remind us where scaffolds fit into our overall district plan and initiatives. Vision 2020 is old. I know we're not supposed to think about that. There's a new plan coming, but I am sure that the new plan will also include this nod to students accessing their voice. So obviously it's important, and it's written in our district plans, that we are providing opportunities for students to exercise agency and advocate for their learning needs. So that's in Vision 2020, and it's also in our capacities of literate students. And as English language arts teachers, you all have seen this document, and there is a sentence in here about being self-directed learners, understanding how to seek out supports we need and use them appropriately as an advocacy for our own learning needs and our own success. So that's sort of the bigger picture of where scaffolds fit in to instruction and into Wake County. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my process for creating scaffolds that not only help kids with the learning task at hand, but also this secondary goal of encouraging their skills with agency and self-advocacy. And before we start, there's just a few little pointers that I always like to keep in mind as you are thinking about and creating scaffolds. And then I'll go into each one in a little bit more depth as we move through today. So the first one, and this is a big one, is that we differentiate scaffolds, not expectations. It's so important that we hold those high expectations for all children, and they can all achieve mastery and proficiency, but they don't all start in the same place. So we honor and we recognize that kids are coming in at different entry points, and differentiating the scaffold allows to make sure that kids have what they need to achieve here, and they all achieve at that high expectation level. So we're sort of doing the work. We're differentiating the supports they need, but not what we expect them to do and what we know they can do. The second bullet is to think about scaffolding for input versus output. What is the essential nature of a student task? So input tasks are those listening and reading tasks. Output are those speaking and writing. And depending on what that nature of the student task is, obviously your scaffolds are going to need to be different. So that's something to think about. The third bullet is one that's super easy to miss because we all have so much work to do and so little time to do it. But determining what mastery or proficiency looks like and working backwards from there is really, really critical. It's just part of that backwards planning process. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means with scaffolds. And then providing multiple entry points. I've been in so many classrooms and seen a wonderful scaffold in place, but one is not necessarily the one that every student needs. So thinking about that there, for any one activity, could be a number of scaffolds that would support various students at different places. And finally, providing students with agency and choice. And this one is critical too. We've had some wonderful conversations with educators here in this group who've made comments like, I don't want to assume a child needs a scaffold when maybe they don't. Or I don't want to inadvertently give that child a message that I think they need help. or that they're in a certain place when maybe they're not, and I'm over or underestimating the type of support that's going to be best for them. So the best person to make that decision and to know what they need is the student typically. So we're going to talk about how to make sure that we're providing the student voice and choice in the selection of the scaffolds that they want to use. All right, go ahead, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay, so here is an example of an actual scaffold from EL. This is a grade 6 module 2 unit. Some of you are probably looking at this and nodding your head. Oh yes, we're about to get into that, or just did it. And this unit is talking about the Middle Ages and challenges and hardships of life during that time. And the task here is to look at 3 different sources. And in the top right there, relevant information from the text is recorded in an informal way, sort of little bullet points and note taking. And then down on the bottom, they have to synthesize that together into a summary and sort of write a more formal paragraph summarizing the information from the bullets. So there is sort of an informal side to this task and a formal side to this task, and it's definitely an output. Students are going to be expected to write something here. All right, you want to move us along, Jennifer? All right, so this is my first step, and that is sort of determining what mastery or proficiency looks like for myself and taking the time to actually complete this task as if you are a student at the mastery level that you expect takes time. I'm throwing this out there. It takes time, but it's so worth it, because once you have created, thank you, Jennifer, this exemplar for what you expect, it's much easier to work backward from there then and thinking about the multiple entry points that students may want to access in order to achieve a product like this. So I actually took the time and I filled this out. I did the informal part up above and made the bullets, and I did the formal part down below where I synthesized all of it into a summary paragraph, because that provides me then my outcome, and it's very easy, or much easier, to move backwards from there and create some different scaffolds, because this is what I know now is my goal, and I want all students to be able to do this. So now I can think about what is a higher, medium, and perhaps lower level of scaffolding that some students may want to access in order to get here. This is a little word of warning. I actually did read this article. It's a real article and it's good, but there's some content in it that's a little effy. So if you're going to share it, make sure you read it all the way through. All right, moving on. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so after I wrote that paragraph then, I thought about a student who might need, for this output task, not only the vocabulary, but also the structure of a summary paragraph. And so that would be a student who would want to access a little bit heavier of a scaffold. And so I went ahead and created a whole paragraph frame. A paragraph frame provides that student the vocabulary that's critical to the lesson, the vocabulary that helps them with the writing task, in this case, summary, but also the structure, right? The beginning, the middle, and the end. Some kids are going to need all of that. So one of the scaffolds then that I would create would be this full paragraph frame. And if you look through it, it's a 6th grade level sort of expectation with the language in there for summary. And I don't think I put in there the key vocabulary from this unit, but I probably would, looking back on it now. So if it's talking about challenges for living, whatever the key vocabulary is from that unit should also be in here too. All right, go ahead, Jennifer. Thank you. So now here's one that's scaled back a little bit. And in my mind, I'm thinking about students who maybe need support with the vocabulary, but not with the structure. So they're pretty good at summarizing, right? So they don't necessarily need the organization and the structure. But there's critical vocabulary from this unit and from summarizing that I want to make sure they include in order to move their writing skills to that mastery level. So this one just has a sentence starter and then an assortment of vocabulary that they can choose from. And then I would expect them to go ahead and try and use in their paragraph. All right, Jennifer. And then this one is a challenge. So those kids who are sort of consistently always meeting expectations really deserve our efforts as well to push them beyond that, right? Push them beyond mastery and proficiency and maybe stretch them a little bit. So sometimes a scaffold for stretching a kid is just what they need. So this is one that I would call a challenge scaffold. I have not provided any support for the structure of the paragraph because if I'm challenging the student, they probably have that down. But I've included some higher level vocabulary and phrases. And this is not something that's coming from the unit that I'm going to teach kids because I don't have time for that. But this is some challenge and sort of beyond vocabulary that some kids may be ready to use. So I put in there analysis, supporting evidence, historical context. Not every kid is going to be expected to use that kind of language for my proficiency or my mastery outcome. That would be beyond. All right, so when we talk about, you can go ahead and flip the slide, thank you. When we talk about how we know which kid needs what, we obviously have input here as their educator, as their teacher. But really the best person to know what they need is the student themselves. So I look at this graphic and I think about the equality versus equity. The equality piece up top reminds me that the same scaffold is not what everybody needs, right? They're coming in at different entry points. So I want to provide all of those. If I can, multiple scaffolds. Sometimes it's just 2. Sometimes I've had time to create 4. And it really comes down to how important is this activity to you, to the unit? How much time do you have? Obviously, it falls down to your choice and your priorities. But like I said, I've done anywhere from 2 to 4. And I don't hand them out. I lay it out as options for everyone. So I make enough for everybody to choose any. And what you'll notice is right off the bat, most kids will go and take the challenge 1, which is fine, right? But then in a couple minutes, they'll come back and they'll put that one down and they'll take another one that matches their need at that time. And maybe they are ready for the challenge 1 and I just didn't even realize it. This is a particular activity that's really great for this because they have to do it 3 times with 3 different sources. So if you're a 6th grade teacher and you're looking for a particular one where you could actually try this and give it a start, this is a good one to start. Because you'll be able to see them choose one that they need. And maybe when they do the second book, they take a little bit less scaffolded sheet there that's got a little bit less support. And maybe by the time they get to that 3rd book, they can do it entirely on their own or they're ready for that challenge. So when we provide that choice and put it in their hands rather than us handing them a scaffold, we're really giving them that agency to know what scaffold they need, make changes if the first one they grab is too much help or not enough. And then to gradually sort of see their progress, right? Gradually, I need less and less of this because I know what to use. All right, moving on. Thank you. All right, so we've got a couple talking points here. And the first one is when you create that exemplar that you're going to then work backwards. So when you fill out that note catcher or you complete that task yourself as if you're a student, how might that also serve as an additional scaffold? Anyone have any thoughts on that? You can just unmute yourself and share.
Can I go? My SPED teachers and I'm Shanna Joseph, by the way, Centennial Magnet. My SPED teachers and I have actually written the essays and then created the graphic organizers around what we wrote and then put things into where kids have all the digital resources, including 1, 2, 3, I think 3 or 4 citation makers for the 8th grade, because that's what they're doing, in order to help them understand the product we're looking for, but also the way in which to create it, because they're suffering from a lot right now. So, yeah.
So that really helps with the organization, right? You're ensuring that the scaffolds you provide are so targeted that they're helping kids organize for that final product. And it sounds like you also share the final product with them, right? So not only do they have the scaffolds to help them along the way, but they know exactly what their target is.
Correct.
Thank you, Shanna.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts about how your exemplar also serves as a scaffold?
Lara, I don't know if you can see the chat, but there are a couple who've added there.
I can't. Let me look it up. Thank you.
And Susie has her hand up. Go ahead, Susie.
I had the one thing that I put in there, I think the modeled work allows them to level up. But what I often do, like with our reader's notes that we have, after maybe they've done, 4 or 5 chapters of the reader's notes, I'll take exemplar work from the students and put that up as an example and a star for other students to see where the bar is. And so they don't continue doing the work at what their mind thinks is good, they then see, oh, this is what she's looking for. This is the quality level. So this is A work. So I find that's really helpful to students to see what is quality work that their peers are doing. And it saves us from having to do it ourselves, because oftentimes the students have, better models than we can create of the work.
I love that. Thank you, Lori. All right, yes, lots of comments about modeling, right? Providing that model, providing that sample. And even as adults, we need that. It's so helpful to have a model or a sample if there's a product we need to produce. So recognizing that once you have created that exemplar, it's not just for naught. You can actually, also use that as a scaffold itself. So it's not wasted time. All right, so our second question then is, how might students scaffold use, so the scaffolds that they choose and use, also serve as some formative assessment data for you? Any thoughts about that?
The student will be able to explain why they needed it at one point and why they didn't. So they'll be explaining their own learning and being able to tell the difference that the scaffold made and how it affected their learning.
Well said. Thank you, Stephanie. So Stephanie even took it a step further, right? For us, we can see what scaffold students are using, and hopefully they will need less over time. That's a really good source of additional data for us. But Stephanie's talking about the students actually using that as well to increase their awareness of their own academic progress, and being able to use those as tools of explanation when they're talking about the progress throughout the year or having conferences with their parents. Great idea. Thank you, Stephanie. All right, let's move us along. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, so we've got 15 minutes here for you guys in your grade level teams to try this out. Jennifer has selected an actual graphic organizer from one of the units that you will be teaching this year. And your task is to, in your groups, create at least 2 scaffolds that are differentiated for each graphic organizer, or for the one that you have. You don't have to do all 3. Obviously, you'll be doing one. So remember to create that exemplar first. It's so tempting not to do that or to just sort of sketch it out, but really completing that as if you are a STAR student is critical. Your kids need and appreciate that, because it shows in the transparency of what they're expected to do and in the clarity that the produced scaffolds then help them move towards that target. So don't be tempted to skip that piece. And then, like I said, work backwards from there and create a couple different scaffolds at different levels that you think kiddos might want to access as they're completing that task. And we're going to have 15 minutes for you to do that in your groups. I know Jennifer has made everything forced copy, so you can actually just sort of make a copy of that note catcher or graphic organizer and then type right into it as you are working on your exemplar or your scaffolds. I was able to pop into everybody's group at least for a little while, and thank you for your excellent conversation. Really, really good scaffolds out there. I saw several different wonderful examples. So just a last reminder is, when you can, to do multiple scaffolds for the same activity. So kids do have that choice, because we really do want to provide them with opportunities to advocate for their own learning needs, right? Which is something we know is important as a powerful strategy, but it's also important to our Wake County district strategic plan. And it takes away some of that stigma, some of those associations and assumptions we may make when we're providing kids the choice in selecting the scaffolds they want or need to use. All right, so a little bit of a whole group debrief here. In what ways was this process, starting with that exemplar and working backwards, maybe new to you? And in what ways does it affirm your current practices? And there's obviously lots of good stuff you guys are already doing. Let me look at the comments here. Go ahead and write them in the chat if you would rather do that than share out. Otherwise, feel free to unmute and share out. Anything new or anything affirming?
I'll share a little bit. my group seems to have all kind of come upon some of the same ideas over the like 4 years that we've been doing the curriculum. So it does feel good to think like, okay, we probably were on the right track if we all were kind of coming to this conclusion after some experience with the curriculum. So we got a few new ideas and, comparing what's worked over years past, but just that we all kind of were similar minded and what was working for our kids were working for others.
That's always good to hear. And I see a couple comments in the chat box about providing multiple scaffolds instead of just one was new for some folks. That thought of putting them all out there and providing kids the choice as to what they want to use was new for some folks. And I'll just affirm that really, as I was able to listen to your conversations and see the scaffolds you've created, there's great work going on out there. All right, any last questions? What questions might still be bumping around in our heads? And I'm going to close the window. I'm not going to wait too long because it is already almost 5 o'clock. Okay, of course, you can always shoot your questions to Dina or Jennifer or myself. Okay, so if you are in a Title I funded middle school, you are entitled to supplemental support. So I am available, and our Title I supporters are available to come out to your school to meet with you, to talk more about scaffolding, to meet with your PLTs or your departments, talk more about scaffolding, do an activity where we sort of work through scaffolds together, whatever additional support you might like. If you are in a Title I funded school, we would love to come out and provide that to you. So if that is something that's interesting, either sort of coaching, working through this process, implementing a little bit more scaffolding in some of your lessons with individual teachers or with your whole PLTs, or you just want me to come out and, sort of chat you through a conversation you're planning on having with a teacher or whatever it may be, please reach out to me. You can take a picture of that slide, or I think you've got the slide deck linked in your agenda today. Or Dina and Jennifer can get in contact with me as well. We can also, if you're ready and you want to, talk a little bit about goal setting with scaffold use and some ways that we might collect data around that. So just know that resource is available to you if you are in one of our many Title I funded middle schools, and we would love to come out and support your efforts. Thank you, Jennifer. You can move us on to the last one. And this is my inspirational quote for the day. I am sending you off with one instead of starting you off with one. And this is from an actual student. This is an 8th grader, not necessarily from Wake County, but this is out of the mouths of our students. School is where you go to learn a secret language, but they don't tell you that it's there. You have to figure it out on your own. It's like an initiation to a secret club. And we have a lot of kids who feel this way. We know we do. So my little reminder that I always send out there is that when students tell you that they don't know what to write, believe them, right? That's what our scaffolds are there for. And when you provide them with that language and that scaffold, they're going to be able to do it on their own next time. So when they tell you they don't know what to write or say, believe them. All right, and thank you so much.